It's Le Quartier, and that means something about the neighborhood. I have that.
It does mean the neighborhood.
It means the neighborhood, yes.
Yeah, so you have the French Quarter, the Latin Quarter. It's just the Quarter is like the anglicized version of Le Quartier.
Hey there, Omaha. Welcome into another episode of Restaurant Hoppen. I'm your host, Dan Hoppen, and there's something that you will notice if you dine out in Omaha a lot, especially at restaurants that love to source local, and they proudly talk about that on their menus. At restaurants that serve sandwiches or bread, you will see the name Le Quartier quite a bit, because that is kind of the go-to bread provider. It's the bread place. Not only is it just at restaurants, but they've got their own retail locations. They're at farmers markets. Le Quartier, since it opened in 2006, has really become like Lincoln and Omaha's bread place for pastries, bread, gelato, and more. And I have needed to meet these guys for way too long. I'm meeting the owners today, have them on the podcast. Seth and John Quiring. Guys, welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you very much. Before we even got on the mics, you helped me out, and I learned something. I've been mispronouncing the name of your business for probably close to a decade. I've been calling it Le Quartier. It's Le Quartier, and that means something about the neighborhood. I have that.
It does mean the neighborhood.
It means the neighborhood, yes.
Yeah, so you have the French Quarter, the Latin Quarter. It's just the Quarter is like the anglicized version of Le Quartier.
I love it. And we'll get into why this place is French-inspired, because, as you guys told me, Montreal is kind of a second home. But before we even get started, because we've got two different voices here, I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves and tell me your favorite Le Quartier product, whether that's a bread, pastry, whatever you're like. If somebody hasn't tried Le Quartier and I'm going to sell them on it, this is it.
Well, hello, this is Seth Quiring. I love to start every morning with a pain raisin, a raisin croissant, if you will, just with a shot of espresso. That is my go-to every single morning if I can. Yeah, I'm stuttering along here, but that's my favorite.
Okay. What about you, John?
Yeah, my name is John Quiring, and I would say my favorite bread, because that's my main thing as the baker, is the Prairie Loaf, which is a rye loaf with sunflower seeds. So I like to take a slice of that and toast it up with some peanut butter and some banana slices on the top of that, and that's my breakfast for the day.
It's hard to start a day better than with some peanut butter toast.
That's like the Elvis there.
You got a little Elvis influence.
Yeah.
So Le Quartier started in Lincoln, but has since expanded, and you guys now have two locations in Omaha, one off 90th and Center, the other in Dundee off 51st and Underwood. When you look at your business, because there are a lot of bakeries in Nebraska, especially Omaha and Lincoln, but Le Quartier is it's different. I think it's not saying anything about any of those other ones, but it's more well-known, I think. What is it about you guys that you feel like sets you apart? What's your kind of calling card compared to other bakeries in the state?
Well, personally, I would say the vast majority of bakeries are focused on sweets, cakes, cookies, things of that nature. We have always been a bread-centric bakery, which I think makes us very unique. It was maybe not the smartest business idea. I think right after we opened in 2006, and I think we launched, and there was a business magazine that came out, and it said top 5 least profitable businesses to open, and I think a bakery was on those. I'm like, yes, we made the list of least profitable ideas.
Hey, 20 years later, that list is long gone. You guys are still here.
Oh, well,
who's laughing now?
Exactly. But I think that was what makes us unique. I think just basically our focus on bread, our quality, and my brother's talent around that, like spending the time in Montreal, the time in Paris, really learning the craft and not just being like a self-taught, no offense to people who do that, but just that extra training that you receive by working in those cultures with trained French bakers makes us very unique. I had said when we opened up, I was very naive and very arrogant, but saying like, we're going to be the Starbucks of bread. Where we're going to take something that everyone knows and we're going to like make people think differently about it. I said, we're not going to be a sandwich shop. We're not going to be a sweet shop. We're going to be a bread. We're going to really be a bread centric bakery. And so we've had to almost create like a bread culture that didn't exist. So yeah, nearly 20 years later, we're just, we're seeing the fruit of that now.
How intimidating was that? I mean, you just said we had to create a culture that didn't exist. You're not just making a business, but you're trying to cause a shift in really a city's collective mind. What made you believe that you could do that?
Well, I think we were a little... No, well, I think we were naive. We, coming from Montreal and from Paris, where that culture does exist, and I thought, oh, this is going to work anywhere, and it is definitely more difficult in Nebraska. But there are people
the U.S. in general, not just this isn't even just a Nebraska thing. I mean, you go to Chicago, you go to Kansas City, like most bakeries are sweet shops. Mm-hmm. We are. I mean, I think we're very like. How many pounds of flour do we go through a week? I mean, we just go through an incredible amount anymore, and like. I don't know there are many places that have built a bread following the way we have because it's a very, very difficult thing. And most people don't have the patience or the hard work that we have to get it done.
Now, to be clear, if somebody does want a sweet treat, they can come into Le Quartier, they can get a macaron, they can get some gelato, they can get a cinnamon roll, things like that. But yes, like you said, focused mostly on the savory and the bread aspect. Seth, I found a quote from you in an article in 2015. So we're going back a decade. So I don't know if this is even accurate anymore, but I wanted to bring it up because I thought it was interesting and I want to see if it still applies today. You told this publication, "We call ourselves a Montreal-style bakery, which gives us a license to be a little more American in our baking style. We take an innovative approach to European classics." What do you think of that quote as I read it back to you today?
I think it's still very true. I mean, so, we would have people from people from France, like expats, come into our store, and they would be upset if we were using cinnamon in anything, for example. Or the first item that put us on the map was our blue cheese loaf. So we do a blue cheese stuffed baguette, if you'd call her a little loaf that is stuffed with blue cheese. That, like, the French wouldn't do that. In Montreal, they can be, Montreal is like 50-50, and so it allows you to do kind of North American with a Euro flavor. And so I think that's what we've tried to do. We're not trying to be, and to kind of go on with the classics, like, we're not trying to invent new things we're not trying to create the cronut. We're trying to just do things that people know, but do them better than what they're used to. And so that's kind of like the take on the classics. Like, we're not trying to invent something crazy and new. We're just trying to do things that people want at with the highest quality that we possibly can.
Speaking of the highest quality, and I hope this is accurate because if it is, it's incredible. I found a source that said that your sourdough starter is 168 years old. Is that true?
There was some controversy about that. But technically, yeah, I guess you could say that I did. It's not like I stole this. Like when I was in France, I went and I found this 150-year-old the bakery that had the sourdough, and I took some back with me. But I purchased it on the starter that said it came from a 150-year-old French bakery, and I actually got several of them, and I tried them, and I picked which one I liked the best. As I was starting the bakery process, and I chose that one, and so you could say 150 plus the 20 years that we've been open, so. It's it's 170 years old. I'm sure there's probably still some molecules that are 170 years old.
That's incredible.
in the sourdough starter.
What does aging do for starter? Like, what does it develop more over time? Or is it just a really cool, fun fact?
I think it's probably more of a fun story than it actually makes it any better. I mean, in reality, those microorganisms have been around for, you could say hundreds or thousands of years. So, I'm not sure that the starter that I got is making it one way or the other.
Fair enough. Now, baking is a science, and you can learn so much about it. But I don't think there's ever a point where you really master bread and that you say, yes, I have solved sourdough. I made the best loaf of sourdough that anyone has ever made. There's always more to learn. You can learn about the environment. You can learn about different starters. You can learn about different flours. There's no mastering bread making. Is that part of the allure for you, and that there's always something to chase? There's always something to learn?
From an experimental side, yes, but from a production side, no, because then it gets frustrating when things don't turn out the way you want them to. Like most bakeries would be they have a pretty confined environment, and it changes, obviously from winter to summer and that sort of stuff with the temperatures and humidity changes, but, it's all predictable and you can adjust. But if I were to take a recipe that I was making in France, for instance, and I try to do it here with American flour with the mixers that I have and the water that I have, it turns out completely different. So it's kind of like you do have to start from scratch and kind of figure out, okay, what is the difference, and make little small tweaks to get back to what you were what you're looking for. So
how difficult was that for you originally? And we'll get more into the backstory, but you, like we've kind of mentioned, you trained in Montreal and in Paris. So these are places that are very well known for your bread, and you're all excited and you want to bring this to the United States, and you move back to Lincoln, and now you're working with different ingredients, and you're definitely working with a different climate, and you basically you've learned so much about bread, and now you almost have to reteach yourself. How difficult of a period was that for you?
Well, I can tell you the first loaf that turned out well in my mother's kitchen as I was practicing this, I had the same feeling of exuberance that I did making my first loaf that I was proud of in Montreal, in my home kitchen there when I was living with Seth. It was just oh my goodness, I figured it out. And so it was quite something. Yeah.
Well, I can even say when we started, we were in a rented kitchen, and then we were transitioning we got an oven, brought it over from Italy, and I can remember I was the delivery driver of fresh baguettes out to grocery stores, and just switching even to getting that new oven, and that was the closest I can remember actually matching what I remember eating from the bakery where John worked in Montreal. Was this is the closest replica that I can think of, and it just I was so excited delivering this bread to the grocery stores. I had this huge smile on my face, and I was had an extra baguette that I was gnawing on myself as I was doing the delivery. It was great.
So, I mean, we've talked about how finicky bread is, how it is such an exact science. You've really got to have the knowledge and the experience to be able to nail it. Now, you guys have 4 locations of your business. There are 2 of you, one of whom is has the bakery training and everything. So you can't be everywhere at once. You've had to teach other people how to take all this knowledge you have and apply it. What was learning that skill set like, where you had to learn and teach yourself not only, okay, now I know all this, but I have to impart this knowledge and impart this mastery to other people, because if your baker at your Dundee location messes up one day, it's not Janine's fault or whatever the baker's name is. It's Le Quartier's fault. So how did you learn to teach other people and learn to trust them?
We're still working on that.
We're still working. Well, you just find people who also have a passion for good bread and good food, and then it makes it a lot easier when you have those kinds of people working for you. So, and fortunately, we have a good group of people, and
we do have a good team, but that also is kind of the story of a little bit of the arc of how our business has changed. When we started and we first had our locations in Omaha, for example, a Countryside Village was the first Omaha location. It was a hard skill to train, hard to get people at that. We were getting people, opening shift was 1 a.m., and so finding people who were good people to show up at those kinds of hours to do that kind of work, very, very difficult. So we were actually keeping that all centrally located at the mothership, 70th and O in Lincoln, and then we would be baking and then sending out from there. So we were trying to control that and control the quality from Lincoln, where John could be there, be a part of it. If he wasn't baking it himself, he was training those people. And now we've moved on to sending dough from Lincoln and, again, working on controlling that process and seeing what we can get away with, as far as, not get away with, that's a bad term, but we want to be baking as much fresh on location as possible. And in fact, we just, Dundee just started baking their own bread a week ago.
Oh, wow.
Maybe that, or 10 days ago. They're now every single store is baking on site. But before that, if we didn't have a system set up, it was coming still fresh every morning, but it was coming from Lincoln and being trucked over. So here, 19 years on, we're just starting to, we're just kind of wrapping up that whole circle of getting people to bake on site with the quality that we think represents us well, that we think our customers deserve. So there's a lot of testing, a lot of training that goes into that whole process.
Yeah, and I think that is just a beautiful example of how difficult the bread making experience is. It is not something that you can just teach quickly and say, okay, you know that now, because if it rains or if the humidity is higher one day, that changes the process. If the oven ages over time and there are hot spots in the oven or something, that changes the process. If the temperature is different, that changes the process. There are so many variables you have to understand, and it's really hard to learn all that and then to teach it to someone. And I commend you guys on baking fresh at each location, because I cannot imagine how difficult that would be. It would be a lot easier to say, hey, let's have our main production facility, let's send it out, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You're still getting a great quality product. But yeah, to have that freshly baked bread on each location, that's something special.
Well, it was survival. So we talk about sustainability, we don't want to be, we're trying to play that balance between being artisan and being a business. And so, being, how do I want to say this? We're burning people out. John, you can only get, if we're doing that all centrally located and sending it out by trucks, and the busier we get, the earlier you have to start showing up to be able to bake that much and send it out. And we were just churning through people. Like, we would have good people. They would work for us for a year or two, and then they'd be like, I can't do this any longer. Then it goes back to John. And so we talked about, like, well, how long, can, not that John's an old man here, but like, if we want to be a sustainable business, like, do you really want to, like, be one baker quitting or one baker, twisting his ankle or whatever away from being brought in to working, the midnight shift day after day after day? Like, so this was a survival strategy of, like, okay, we have to find a way to control what we can control and still maintain, if not, I in a lot of ways, I feel like our sourdough is better now than it's ever been. And so that's a credit to John and his team to find ways to get people to bake fresh on site and continue to work on increasing that quality.
I love it. So you guys have been in business for about 20 years now. I find it fascinating because I think about, every sibling relationship is different. Like, I love my sister very dearly. If we went into business together, we would be at each other's throats in 20 minutes, much less 20 years. Have you guys always been really close, even before the business began?
I think so.
This is a credit to our mother.
Maybe so.
Or, we just always, like, I can't remember us, there were no fist fights. We didn't have that kind of childhood. We just all got along. Four and
a half years difference in age, so we were never, like, in high school together. So like, I was a freshman in high school and he was a freshman in college, for example. So never really running into each other on that. And, like, there was obviously a huge size difference, so, like, I wasn't going to pick a fight, that's for sure. And he was nice enough not to, like, pick on me too badly. So, and I think what has really worked, because everyone said, like, I was told certainly that it was a bad idea to go into business with a sibling and all of that, but we have such different roles, thankfully. Like, I have a business background, and so I've tried. I don't anymore. I've learned not to, but back in the day, I remember, like, some orders that had gotten messed up, and I tried, like, okay, well, I've seen John just, like, mix this dough and form it, and it seems so easy. Disaster. It could not have gone any worse. Like, I'm trying to form these breadsticks at this Gringato. I'm sorry to Gringato for the breadsticks they received from me, but, like, I'm trying to form this bread. It was a disaster, and so I learned quickly that I should never get involved in the kitchen, and I'll just focus on the business side of things, and he does his business. I could never do what he does, and I think that helps a lot. It's like there's no, like, clashing. And even when we do get kind of heated, I think we both understand that, like, I'm probably more quick to yell and curse than he is, but, like, I think thankfully he understands that it's all, like, business.
Mm-hmm. Not personal.
It's not personal.
And it's also nice to have a business partner that you trust 100% too. So, that's on the positive side of things,
For sure.
Yeah, I think we like, our skill sets are very different, and it works out well. If they were too similar, I think that would be a problem.
Yeah, you're the yin to each other's yang. So, Seth, after graduating college, you were the one who actually moved to Montreal originally for work. When you moved there and you started experiencing the pastries and the bread up there, what drew you to that culture?
Oh, goodness. I mean, we were born and raised small town, Nebraska, Hamilton County. And I was happy with that. And I went to college, got a job at Learjet in Wichita. I was happy enough. And then something just clicked. And I'm like, I need adventure. I need to do something different. And the opportunity, Learjet was bought out by Bombardier. They needed someone to go up there. I was fortunate enough to get that opportunity, and I just was like, I wanted to try anything. So, like, we would go to restaurants, and they would be like, I remember this place, they like veal brains it was an appetizer, and the chef, or not the chef, the the waiter is like, oh, if you haven't tried veal brains, I'm like, well, like everyone else is like, oh, gross, and I'm like, yeah, like veal brains, give it to me. I just wanted any adventure, anything new. I don't know. I just became like just craving any kind of new experience. And, you know, I had a friend there who took me to, it was actually one of the branches of the bakeries that John worked at. And they were like, you have to get a chocolate croissant. And like when it finishes, there's like the pain au chocolat, there's a little piece of chocolate that's sticking out of the end, and that's your last bite, you know, where you get the buttery croissant with that piece of chocolate, and like that's how you finish, you know. And I tried that, and I'm just like, that is amazing. It tasted so good, you know, like you can't help but have a great day eating a chocolate croissant. You know, and another friend from Paris was like, oh, you know, you got to fight over the baguette, you know, you as a kid, you rip off the ears of the baguette, that crunchy bit, and that's what you eat. And so I was just kind of absorbing what people were saying, and I loved it. So, you know, eventually John joined me in Montreal, and the plan was not for him to become a baker, but he did, and you know, it was just like, well, I gotta we have to get involved with this, and we need to start something, you know, back home with this kind of experience that we can't have in Nebraska.
What you just said right there is what I love about food so much. You were talking about a memory from, I don't even know, at least 20, probably more like 25 or 30 years ago, of eating that chocolate croissant and finishing with that last bite of small chocolate. And the way that you were describing it, it was like you just had this 5 minutes ago. It was like that clear in your mind. There's so few things in life that I think can transport us back to moments like food can. It's just amazing to me.
It's like the scene in Ratatouille is so true.
Right. Yeah. It's beautiful. Okay, so John, you joined in 2002. You come up to Montreal, but like Seth mentioned, you were not a baker by trade. You were actually, if my research is correct, you were an electrical engineer.
That's my formal education. Yeah. So, and I had been working in Seattle before I moved up, working with some startups with the .com area. I was programming for them, doing some coding. None of those turned out, so I was kind of like, Seth offered. He's like, "Hey, I'm moving up more permanently. I'm going to have an apartment paid for, so you can move up for free." And I'm like, well, that sounds... I was also looking for adventure. And so, yeah, without a whole lot of planning behind it, I decided to move up there and just kind of see what happened.
Our mother is Canadian, so that gave the opportunity. So we could go back and forth without an issue. So
now, from what I understand, what got you guys down the baking path was a shared hatred of soggy Montreal pizza.
That is right. So they do it this. They call it the all dressed, and so it's basically like their supreme pizza. And when you order it there, it's you would pick up the slice, and there would be a little pool of water, like the cooked off like veggies would create like a little pool of like water, and you'd pick it up, and yeah, the tip would just soak down. I think John would say at the bakery where he worked, they did a pizza, and if he baked it properly, like no one would buy it. I believe is a story you've said in the past.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Anyway,
He'll take your word for it.
Because I think they did like a sheet pan, right? Like,
oh, you're right. Yes, yeah. If you baked it long enough so that the crust was properly baked, they thought it was overbaked.
Yeah. So the only place you could get a decent pizza in Montreal was in Little Italy. Little Italy did have great pizza, but
our house.
So then we would throw parties at our house with like work friends and neighbor friends, and John would like have, like raw dough outside, because it's like, we do it in the winter, so it's like they're basically a freezer outside, and just like pull them out, and we would just be topping them however and baking them, and yeah, it was like the best. I mean, to me, if I could eat any food, pizza would be the food I would eat every day, all day,
Amen, brother.
And you get every food group. It's perfect. So, yeah. So that was kind of like the idea that like we've got to start something, like the pizzas we're making, and then we start coming to reality of like, okay, like some guys whose broken French would never work. Like we can't open a business in Montreal. It doesn't make sense, to give them the pizza that we felt like they deserved. And so we're like, okay, well, if we can't do pizza in Montreal, like what are the other options? And so we start kind of coming up with different things. And then, in the end, it was like, well, at that point, so within like a couple months, John was transferred to Paris. I was transferred to Chicago. And then, then we really started talking about, okay, what are we really doing? Are we going to go meet back in Montreal? Are we going to, start something in Chicago? And it's like, in the end, it was like coming back to Nebraska made easily the most sense. We had family support, things like that. And, at the time it wasn't as exciting as saying like, hey, let's, Chicago is obviously a bigger, at the time, still obviously Chicago has more going on, all that, but we end up saying like, hey, let's take the safer route of coming home, which I'm so thankful we did. And yeah, I feel like I'm not really answering the question, but
you answered the question beautifully. But I do want to rewind a little bit. John, you mentioned you were not a baker, did not have baking experience. You kind of just moved up to Montreal for adventure and to be with your brother. How did you catch the baking bug?
I would say the last few years I was living in Seattle, I was very much into what I thought was French culture. So I was into French movies. I was into, and then one of those things was if I could figure out how to make like a French baguette, that would be the ultimate thing. So I started baking, and I went to the library and I checked out books, and I had sourdough starters, I had biggest starters, I had all sorts of things in my closet that I was like, okay, it's got to be here for 24 hours, and then I'm going to put some bricks in the oven, and I'm going to put the ice cube tray in there and stuff. And so the house that I was living in with those people thought I was probably pretty crazy with all the experiments and stuff. And I never could figure it out. I was never happy with any of the bread. And so that all was still transpiring during this, when I knew I was moving to Montreal. And then when I got to Montreal, I had some savings. So I was just kind of like, or I was really just kind of enjoying the new studio I was in. But I was still baking, so I'd be out on a walk with Seth, and it'd be like, oh, my timer went off on my watch, and be like, oh my goodness, I got to go back. I have to give this dough a turn and stuff like that. And so it was actually Seth when I was like, you're so much into bread. Why don't you get a job at a bakery? Well, partly that could have been because
I can remember exactly what it was. It was about 2:00 in the morning. I had a 9-to-5 job, or more than that. It was like we worked nonstop. 2:00 in the morning, he's like listening to Pulp Fiction. He's watching Pulp Fiction, TV blaring, and I'm like, you have got to get a job. No more of this, just kind of like hanging out here. It's fun. I like it. I love you. You're my brother, but like you need a job. So like we need to figure out something for you to do. And I don't mean to steal your story, but then he translates his electrical engineering resume into French, and then bakes some baguette rolls at the house, packages them, and just starts delivering them to local bakeries. And one of them, we lived a half a block away from the top-rated bakery in Montreal, excuse me. And then, I don't know, you can tell the story, but like they called you back, right? And we're like, didn't really believe that you made the bread.
Yeah, well, the owner there, he was from France, and yeah, I had gone back the next day, and I said, oh, did you get my application? And he's like, oh, so you're the one that brought in the bread. He's like, this is the kind of bread that we make here. And I'm like, okay, well, good. That's this is what I want to learn how to do. And he's like, are you sure you want a job here? And I'm like, I would love a job here. And so he said, okay, we'll show up at midnight tonight. And so I worked like 2 shifts, and then I didn't hear back from them after that second day. So I went back again. I was like, I really enjoyed working, these 2 shifts, So I basically just kind of, even though I had no experience, my French was terrible. I showed enough effort or enthusiasm that they were willing to spend the time to train me. And so I started working for them, and that was the beginning of my baking life.
And what was that like for you? Because you talked about how you have had this fascination with bread for at least a couple years, maybe even longer than that, but you've never really been able to capture it, or maybe you'd started capturing it in Montreal because obviously you impress these people with your bread, but all of a sudden you just have like this whole new world unlocked for you, and this amazing bakery hires you, and they're teaching you to make new stuff, and you're learning new techniques. I mean, you had to just be like a kid that just got like a free pass to Disney World, right?
It was great. It was also very difficult. Like, it's one thing when you're just doing it for fun, but when you're doing it and someone is, like it's a business and they need to have a product that they're proud to serve, and you do it in a timely manner. So there was plenty of frustrating times where it's because like it's been so long that I kind of forget how hard it was to learn. But I'm told by my employees, they're like, don't look at John, because when he does something, it's just like he's just waving his hands, and you have a loaf, that's formed at the end of that. And that's kind of, but it was a very long struggle of me trying to like get have the intuition of like, I can feel this dough, and this is what the dough wants me to do. Because I always tell people, is like, you have to become the dough, and like you're talking to it, or you have to listen to it with your hands, because it's gonna tell you what it wants, and you can't go past that, or else it'll rebel.
That's very difficult to learn.
It's very
listen to the dough.
It's very difficult to explain that to somebody. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to explain it to somebody. I have to you just have to, I can do my best to explain it, but you have to, you need thousands of reps, and then you kind of like, oh, okay, now I kind of get it, because it's doing what I want it to do. But
so you went and you trained at that bakery in Montreal. Then you went and spent some time in Paris, which is, I assume, just a whole nother level. And you guys start having these conversations about, well, maybe we should open a bakery. Do you remember like those, when it started to feel real, where it wasn't just like, oh, you have a lot of baking skills now, we should open a bakery back home, but it was like, oh, maybe we should quit our jobs and actually do this?
Well, I had already quit my job, because I had left France, and with the intention of coming back to the United States, and I was still a little unsure of like, do I need a little bit more experience? Because I had really only 2.5 years, 3 years of actual bakery experience.
Mm-hmm. Because, and to the French, it was a little bit like what you were saying earlier, where you never really get there, right? So like there are people that John was working with that were just like machines, and they would feel like they're not. Like their expectations for what you need to know and how much experience you have is just like completely different to an American mentality of like,
It's much more formal. So they would be like, yes, you go to school, there's a school that you go to be a baker. You do that for 2 years, and then you're kind of like this apprentice, and then you move up to the next level and the next level, and it's like that whole process probably takes 10 years, and then you're like, now I feel
It's
ready.
like becoming a doctor.
I'm ready to start my own bakery. That's what every French person who had the intention of starting their own bakery, that's kind of the path that they were on.
And if I'm not mistaken, like it was a situation where they're supposed to be learning, you work at multiple places, you learn their systems, and then you kind of create your own version to take that, the craft to a higher level, right? I believe is kind of some of the things I've heard you say in the past. So they didn't think you were ready, but I don't, like, my memory was when you went to Paris, and the idea was, they thought you were going to come back to Montreal, but I don't remember you ever... I don't think the plan was ever to come back to Montreal for us. Like, we weren't telling the guy that.
Yeah, right. No.
Because he was, getting you the work permit and all of that. So to come back then to work in Montreal again. But the plan was always to do something. And as far as from my side of it, like, I had a very good job, but you get tired of, I had spent 10 years working for Learjet Bombardier, and, even though I was treated very well, I still felt like I was a number in the end, and I wanted to do something. I basically was like, if I wake up, 10 years from now and I'm still at this job, I'm going to feel terrible that I just kind of, I was just coasting for way too long in my life. So I felt like I needed a new adventure. So it wasn't that difficult to decide to maybe I took a little convincing, but I don't think much. My heart was definitely not in my job at that point. That's for sure. Sorry, Bombardier.
When I'm sure they're listening to this.
Yeah.
When you guys first started, I want to say for the first 6 or 7 months, you didn't have a retail location, didn't have a brick and mortar, but you were doing wholesale. Why was that the first move for you?
I was on a very limited budget. So I was subleasing a commercial kitchen space, and I was like, well, I don't know. Like, looking back, I was incredibly naive.
Well, we had
I didn't have any concept of what, like I said, kind of what I was saying earlier, I was naive in, like, there's going to be a bread culture just like there is in Montreal, in Lincoln, Nebraska. Well, that didn't turn out to be the way. That wasn't true. It's not true, which is fine. I just didn't know. I didn't know that at the time, and I thought that I could. I thought my foot into the door in the bread world or the bakery world in Lincoln was through wholesale. I quickly found out that was not true, and fortunately, my timing was. Farmers markets were only a couple months after I started the lease at this commercial kitchen. That's where I found the people who were interested in good bread. And so through that whole summer, I just kind of like, I got the confidence that a retail bakery would succeed in Lincoln. And so that's when I started seriously looking at a retail location and then actual, like, real bakery equipment.
Yeah, we were very naive. We had no idea what the demand or who was going to be buying our product. But yeah, it didn't take long. There's like I'll keep names out of this, but there was an Italian restaurant in Lincoln. I brought our product to, we baked this fresh bread, and, basically he's coming to me saying, like, if it's a penny more than I'm paying right now, I don't want it. And he's like, see this bread? He had a bag of bread from a mass-produced place, and he's like, it's sitting on top of the oven. And he's like, see this? He's like, I don't know how long this has been sitting on the oven for, but he's like, it still hasn't molded yet. He's like, can your bread do that?
Oh,
and I'm like, no. And he's like, I need, basically, it was just like, there were lots of conversations I had with restaurant owners I'm sorry not to throw Lincoln under the bus, but like Lincoln restaurants. So what was strange was, like, the Lincoln restaurant scene had, outside of two places, Green Gateau and Dish, they had no interest in us whatsoever. But the clients like the people at the farmers markets were clamoring for us, and so we're like, this is strange. There's like this disconnect where there are like so many people of the public seem to want what we have, but we talk to restaurants, and outside of these two places, they don't. And then people from the farmers markets took the bread to a couple local grocery stores and said, like, hey, you got to bring the stuff in. And so that's when we started getting into some grocery stores because customers were coming to them, and then they were being responsive to the customers. So thank you to those the grocery stores. Where then in Omaha was just a completely different feeling where I'd go in. I think actually the French Cafe, RIP, was our first big account where we, like they were looking for things to separate them from other restaurants, where Lincoln saw any extra, even like a penny extra expense as like, that's a penny thrown away, where Omaha restaurants were like, hey, any way I can separate myself and graze our standard, the better. So I found way more open doors in Omaha than I did in Lincoln talking to restaurants. And so that was just different, where the Lincoln population was, people were coming to the grocery stores and farmers markets. And then in Omaha, it was the restaurants that were interested in us. So we were just trying to like respond to what was coming our way.
Isn't that wild? 50 miles and completely different dining and restaurant cultures.
And I will say this, like it's a cliche, but we truly had the family farm. Like our bakery was started, the collateral for the bakery was the family farm. My parents signed off on their farmland for it. It's like failure was not an option. We took lots of other places were going with, and I'm not saying in the bakery, but in restaurants, we would see people going big with like, fancy stores and doing this. And we would be jealous because a lot of they were getting a lot of publicity that we felt like we wanted, but we always were taking the conservative way because we were just so scared about not being able to like pay the loan back. So
what is it like working with restaurants? I mean, obviously I love just having your bread as is, but if I see Block 16s running a special on a Le Quartier croissant, or my favorite breakfast sandwich that I think I've ever had is at Saddle Creek Breakfast Club, and that's on one of your croissants. Like, how do you establish and maintain those relationships? What does it look like having that communication with restaurants?
Well, we've made lots of mistakes. I will just say that. So there's we've met some amazing people through this. There have been a lot of difficult relationships. Like we've gotten burned really badly with some people. That's such a complicated thing because I've been yelled at and demeaned, and like that's a little painful. Like I've had a lot of like horrible relationships with chefs that I felt like completely disrespected what we're doing. And then you also work with amazing people. Like I got to know Jess at Twisted Cork Bistro before her and Paul started Block 16. And so I've known them for a couple of decades now. Like they're amazing. And so like people like that are wonderful to work with, and we have such a great relationship with. Since COVID, I've really taken a step back from wholesale in a lot of ways, because it's, we're running our own business, and then you're also like wholesale is a completely separate business. And that's been a struggle from day one for us, because we didn't know what demand was. And we were just trying anything to sell our product. You're almost like, I felt like I had, when we would have 40 restaurants we were selling to, I felt like I was, in some ways, like I was answering to 40 different people. Like they would say like, they're wanting product all the time. They're wanting, fixing this, fixing that. It was just like I was running all over the place. I was kind of losing my mind, and it was really hard to stay focused on our own internal business. And I think that Le Quartier retail has suffered because of some of the distractions of wholesale.
Fair enough. We could spend so much time talking about stories from the past and how you got here, and we have maybe a little bit more time to do that. But there's one story that I have to hear, and that is a Le Quartier in 2010, a Le Quartier delivery van was involved in a bank robbery.
Yeah.
What is that story?
I got the call from our driver. He was delivering to Kona Grill at Village Point, and I get the call that he's like, and like his voice is just like shaking. He's like traumatized, and he's like, the van's gone. And I'm like, what do you mean the van's gone? And he's like, and he's saying he turned it off and all of this, but I'm pretty sure he left the vehicle running. I don't think he ever admitted to the fact that he left the vehicle running while he ran in to do a delivery. But regardless, so the van is gone. We don't know, it's got all the product in there for the rest. I'm like, okay, which deliveries have you done? Which ones haven't you done? I'm having to call these restaurants like hey, you're not going to get your delivery today. I'm so sorry. And then a couple days later, the police call and they're like, hey, we found your vehicle in a ditch. They're like, yeah, there's a known guy with a drug problem. We've been following him for weeks. I'm like, well, you should have been following him while he was.
Where were you when he's stealing her delivery van and I'm having to make all these calls to people?
Yeah. So, and in typical, so they're like, well, where's the van? It's at they've got it in the police impound lot. And I show up there and they're like, that's $250, something like that. I'm like, $250? I'm like, my van was stolen. He's like, you got to pay the impound fee. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? And of course they had, these people are hearing story after story. Like they had zero sympathy. So I'm like, I hand over my credit card for them to run it. I go out there and my key doesn't fit in because they've done the fingerprinting, so they've got so much dust. I can't even unlock the van from the main door. I've got to go to the passenger side. The passenger seat is covered in blue ink because the bags exploded.
Oh my god!
Because they were like, whatever it is, you get so far away from the. So I go in. The van is blue. I can't use the door locks anymore. I'm paying an impound fee, and I'm just like, I'm questioning why I'm in wholesale.
Probably not a scenario you imagined that you would be in as you're contemplating opening a bakery.
No, but it did make for a great story, and I feel like I should reach out to the Bank of Bennington at some point and get their side of the story.
When you guys look back, I mean, it's been almost 20 years now. How do you think Le Quartier has evolved the most over time?
I mean, hopefully we know what we're doing a little bit more now than we did before. I would just say, I had only eaten in restaurants prior to owning a restaurant or bakery. I hadn't worked. I had zero work experience in the food industry whatsoever. So, I mean, the number of mistakes, and we still make mistakes, of course, but the number of mistakes that I made and just understanding, the role of customer service and the customer experience. And I mean, we were basically like a Chinese takeout place, like when people would get pastries to go, like I was using like recycled boxes. Like I'm like, oh, bakery boxes. What a crazy invention that is, hopefully we know what we're doing. I mean, we went from like designing our own places. Now we try to, we try to use like experienced people to actually help us now. But I don't know. What would you say? In the end, though, I mean, I still eat Le Quartier every single day. I still love coming into work. I still feel like we're improving our quality. I don't think like we're coasting in any way. I think we are always trying to improve. So in a lot of ways, I mean, I feel like we're still the same, just more mature. I don't know if that's...
I think that's a wonderful answer. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I think that our the direction we're going, we're probably more confident where we're going instead of trying, like early on where, we were maybe unsure of which direction to go. We were kind of back and forth. Now I feel like we are more confident in the direction we're going, but like I still have the same feelings that I did in day one. Like, how do I make this sourdough better? and I'm constantly searching for, like, I have these breads, and it's still like, is there too much variety? Am I giving people what they want? I'm still asking all those same questions. How can I make, how can I improve the process? Like, probably from my engineering background, that's probably, not only do I love the bread side of it, but I also enjoy my job as part of the process side. Like, how do I make this process more efficient and more replicable? Because, we are taking our bread and we're baking it out. Each location is baking their own bread now. Well, how do I make that process easier for the person in these stores who doesn't have as much training, as the people, or like as I do? So, those are kind of those are questions that I'm always asking myself, and I have always asked myself. So in some ways, nothing's changed, but in some ways, everything has changed.
I mean, we're still. This will be our 19th. This Christmas, I think we opened up on December 23rd.
Yes.
The first retail store was
of 2006.
2006.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still every day in the bakery, more or less. And I regret that a little bit. I wish I could step away, but I at the same point, like, I feel this. I feel so much pressure to make sure. Like, I still, like, when I'm a nervous wreck on like our Christmas Eve. Christmas season is the busiest, and like, I think I'm going to ruin someone's Christmas if we don't come through. Like, I just have that anxiety of, like, if we're not filling orders correctly, if we don't have a good, because it's one thing to bake small batch, but when you're baking that level of bake, like we're doing like a week's worth of business in one day, and you've got to, all of the logistics that go into that. Seeing it through and actually having a high quality bake is not easy. And just all of those things. Like, I feel so much pressure to make sure that we're coming through with a quality product every single day, every single time. So, anyways.
Well, I think what each of you just said is why you guys have been so successful. Is after 2 decades, it would be pretty easy to turn it on autopilot and to just say, okay, we've got our processes. This got us to this level of success. Let's just keep going. And that's not what you guys have done. You're still searching. You're still searching, how can we make the product better? How can I improve the breads? How can I learn new breads? But you're also looking for the processes. How can we better train bakers so we can have freshly baked bread at each location? How can we ensure that nobody's Christmas is going to be ruined either way? But I totally understand where you're coming from. How can we make sure no one's Christmas is ruined? I think that is a huge part of what's made you so successful. And I want to end on just a quick aside. I'm going to answer my own question from the beginning of the podcast when I asked, like, what you guys like would recommend to someone. For me, and I've been enjoying Le Quartier bread for, like I said, a long time, mostly in restaurants, but I've also gotten croissants, I've gotten bread from the farmer's market and stuff, and I've always really liked it. But I'm currently on this hunt for breakfast sandwiches. I'm trying breakfast sandwiches from everywhere. And I went into one of the Omaha locations and just got the sausage and egg croissant sandwich. It's such a simple sandwich. There's nothing really dressed up about it. But just that croissant itself was so buttery and flaky, and you can like feel the layers as you're like biting through them. I was just like, this is amazing. I've enjoyed this product forever. I got to meet these guys, and I got to learn more about this. And today I got that opportunity. Seth and John, thank you so much, guys, for coming on the podcast. This has been an absolute blast.
Yeah, thank you
again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
Omaha, as always, thanks for eating with us.